Hello, and welcome to Propy's episode 144 of our weekly webinar. This is going to be a webinar about the outlook for the commercial market. I'm your host. I'm Gwyneth Iredale. I'm on the customer success team at Propy, and we're so pleased to have today Carly Chances. Carly, welcome to the webinar today.
Thank you for having me.
And you're a real estate agent with Sotheby's International Realty, right? And you're in the Miami market. You've been a Miami native, and you excel at marketing, I see. And gosh, you've had quite a bit of success with billion-dollar companies working with commercial real estate. That's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I see that you are particularly savvy in Web3 and bringing investors, major real estate developers, and businesses into blockchain. Is that how you found Propy and were interested in Propy?
I guess somewhat. You have to be relevant on everything that's going on.
Excellent. And is there anything more you want to tell us about your background?
So just born and raised in Miami. I'm as Miami as they come. These New Yorkers and all the other real estate agents don't have anything on me because I was born in the city. So I've seen it develop. And part of the reasons why I love commercial real estate so much is that I have been born into all the growth and into all the development here. So that's what makes my job the most exciting.
Excellent. Wow. And what a job you have. Commercial real estate is made up of lots of different asset classes. Can you name a few of them that you work in?
So, for example, there's medical, industrial, land, offices, retail. There's just so many of them that the list goes on and on. And in between all of those asset classes, they get into so many specifics because you have both sales and leases representing landlords and tenants. So there's a lot that goes into play with every single asset class. Lots of underwriting, lots of analysis, lots of math.
Goodness gracious. So wow, the skills you need to have to be an agent in commercial real estate. What kind of skills do you need?
So basically, it's just about being a people person at the end of the day and networking. I personally, all of my business is based on my network. And I feel like that's a really important skill set is you have to know people in the city, you have to know people in the county, you have to be politically involved. Like you basically just have to be that person that says, who do I need for this and be able to have the immediate resources. So it's more of like a concierge service that I would consider in commercial, but very in terms of who is actually in power in with decision makers. And I mean like math as well, because it's all numbers at the end of the day. So it's just a matter of being extremely decisive and you have to be quick on your feet when you see a deal. So it's like knowing your comps and your numbers cold and looking into a different market and saying like that's a good deal, that's not a good deal, that's overpriced. And the same way like residential agents know the different buildings and what the price per square foot is, commercial is just numbers, but it varies across all the different asset classes. So you have to have a really good memory for numbers and areas.
Wow, wow. So I'm impressed. You also have a marketing background and strength in marketing, and often numbers and marketing, one sort of creative. And so what kind of background do you have that could help you be so successful in covering all those aspects of those different asset classes?
So I like to look a lot like the psychology of marketing. I've been really good with numbers. I mean, math was never my forte when I was in school, but I do have a very good memory and I tend to remember patterns very easily just because I grew up as a musician. So naturally, like I've been using the two parts of my brain, which is like the creative side, but also like the technical side. And I feel like that has really helped me with my success over the years is that I was naturally raised to be able to use the two parts of your brain at the same exact time.
Interesting. Yes, because it sounds like you do need to have that. And gosh, working with city and county officials and knowing about new developments. So can you outline a little bit of the process there? I mean, do you hear about land for sale and how does the whole process start where you start to be involved in commercial?
So, commercial, if we're talking about land here, I mean, There is a shortage of land right now, and just specifically talking about like Miami-Dade or even in the state of Florida. But I don't mean a shortage of land in actual that you could do harvesting on or just dead real
Mhm.
estate. This is land that's approved for zoning. So the other day I was reading this article about Costco and how Costco is
Yeah.
starting to create their new designs with apartments on them. So when you think that a
Mhm.
Costco is like 100 to 150,000 square feet, that's about 800, 1,000 apartments that could be built on top of the actual structure. So it's like we're using the land technically for retail and industrial, but then there could be a lot of density on the property. And in order to maximize the square footage and all the density, you can go vertical. And they're going vertical by doing apartments. So when people say that there isn't any land, there is land, it's just not zoned to do what you want to do. So that's why there is a limited inventory in terms of that, because then you're building all these apartment buildings. And that's why there's such a high price per square foot nowadays, is because when you actually find a piece of property where you can build like 8 stories, 12 stories, 30 stories, 50 stories, whatever it may be, it's very valuable to developers because they know that the higher that they can build, the more money they're going to make.
Wow. So it all comes down to profit or ROI and
Mhm.
profitability per square foot, I guess, is the math that you're talking about. Is that right?
Yes. And
Wow.
zoning. Zoning is
Zoning, of
very important.
course. Yeah. I mean, if I lived next to Costco, and I was in a residential neighborhood, so there's some politics in there too, right?
Yeah, get your Costco card.
I go downstairs for the hot dogs.
Yeah, it seems a little bit, a
Mm.
lot of people.
But what I love is that it optimizes the opportunity, and maybe it's affordable housing, and we really need that. What are some of the challenges in the market that you see as affordable housing, for example, one of the challenges in maybe multifamily?
So affordable housing is definitely what most developers across the board are the ones who struggle with. And that's the asset class that in multifamily in specific that a lot of developers want to get into because that is just, it's a need. Right now, in my opinion, I think that there is too many luxury properties and there's too many developments that are just unaffordable. I mean, you see all these new developments, there's a ton of construction and everything is over $1 million. And you think about it, it's like that's not what the average person can afford to purchase a property. And even like the rental rates, and in order to increase the supply, because the land costs are so expensive right now and the construction costs are very expensive, that naturally, in order for the developer to make any sort of return, you have to price the properties high. So it's like you pay high, but then you're making high. So if you can buy for lower, then that's when affordable housing is really beneficial, is because it all just comes down to what is the price and what is the cost of the land and of the construction.
Yeah, yeah. And then how fast can the investors make their money back to pay off their
Mhm.
their loans, their construction loans?
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
with the loans too, I mean, the banks right now. So last year in 2022, there was almost 30% less sales for multifamily developments, which was a significant decrease that we saw from 2021. And the reason is because the banks are just not giving out these loans to people anymore. And then they're going to the private lenders to be able to get it, but then they cost at a premium. So because it's so difficult to get it with the rates now, we're seeing a slowdown in terms of these big purchases.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, gosh, you impress me with all the knowledge you have. That's amazing. So, if somebody was in residential real estate and they wanted to work with you, or if they have an investor, and do they co-list with you, or how could they ever learn all the stuff that you have tucked into your your toolkit?
Yeah.
How would somebody get into residential, or is it best to do a referral to somebody who specializes in commercial?
Yeah, a lot of times it's on a case by case basis. I mean, I'm all about working collaboratively with people.
Mhm.
Most of the time, I just tend to do referrals because when you have it's like having too many chefs in the kitchen, it gets really
Mm.
messy. And if you don't know what you're doing, you could kill a deal. I know that a lot of times when I have worked with agents who don't know their numbers really quick, they tend to lose the deal. And sometimes it's better just to give a referral than it is to be able to be part, but it all just comes down to being active in the market, studying, it's knowing the basic terminology. And with time, I mean, I feel like to be a successful commercial real estate agent, it took me like my first 2 years that I was an agent was I was a sponge. I just learned. Like, and that's what I would recommend anybody do is like you just really have to you just have to understand it for the first 2 years, be willing to learn because it's not something that you learn overnight.
Wow. Yes, I can imagine. And it's probably a little bit like the coaches will say, mentor or follow somebody who's successful in your market. And you must have
Yes.
done a good job of doing that because maybe you even surpassed their success.
I have lots of mentors, so it's great.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's fantastic. So going back to the marketing tactics, because you have that creative brain equally applied as your logical side, do you have certain marketing tactics that you set you apart? Any sort of value propositions that you take when you're trying to land some listings?
So I am the queen of follow up. Like I will follow up with you until the day that you tell me to stop calling you. It's like once I have your phone number or your Instagram, like you're locked in for life with me. But I use social media a lot. I
Ah,
probably get more than 50% of my clients just come from my social media because I'm all about giving educational value. So for anybody who follows me like on TikTok or on LinkedIn, on Instagram, I'm on everything and I'm just constantly
ah,
feeding information because most of the properties that I work on and most people who I represent everything is strictly off market. So it's very difficult to be able to market properties and to market and to be able to market like the actual deals that I'm doing just because I'm on a lot of NDAs with different clientele. But the way that I have to use social media is as a form of trust. And if my audience says that I know my facts and I know my data, naturally they're going to want to work with me. And I feel like that's been the most that's been where I've been able to generate the most clientele is because I want you to see me like as a resource and as a service and as a trusted service, most importantly, at the end of the day. It's not so much as to what are you selling and show me a picture of this property. It's like, how much money are you going to make me? How much money are you going to save me?
mhm.
How much are you going to like build my equity or what's my property going to be worth in a few years down the line? So it's a matter of just being educational.
Wow, that's it. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think all agents want to be educational, but then, how much time do you spend educating somebody versus turning
Mhm.
it into dollars? So I'm
Yes.
sure agents have an idea of their hourly rate, for example, if you look at it, and if you spend a lot of time educating. So it must be a good balance in those 2 years you invested up front, sure paid off, it seems like.
But it's a daily thing. I mean, I'm very strict with my routine. I study the markets every single morning. Like I wake up probably like at 5 a.m. I'll work out. And a lot of times, like when I'm ending my workout with like a cardio, I'll just be on the machine, like reading the market, reading the updates, like knowing what's new. And then I'll come home and then I'll study the market for probably like an hour, 2 hours before I even start my day because I need to be at the forefront. And it's like you just have to know what's going on at all times. You have to be ultra prepared.
So I'm envisioning a sponge, as you said before, on a stationary bike. It's soaking up all the information. Yeah, you have to stay relevant, right? And so let's talk about the market for a minute here. So you already mentioned that there are certain types of asset classes that are make developers more money, and when you can buy low and keep the costs down, we can
Mhm.
see some more affordable housing. But what outside influences are affecting the market? We've moved out of COVID pretty much. Are we heading to a recession? And how are you pivoting or changing your tactics in the market you might expect?
So I mean, we are in a recession, even though a lot of people there was a lot of articles that I read yesterday saying that we just went into a recession. And I'm like, we have been in one for the past couple months. It's just been moving very slowly. And that's why it was very difficult to monitor whether we were in one or not, was because it was just going, it was moving so slow that like the average person was barely able to see it. But I mean, we're actually going to start to feel, I mean, the Board of Economics released this morning that we're going to feel like the actual impact of the recession starting of Q2 of this year. So right now, because like that was huge news that came out this morning, people are taking like a really big drawback. I feel like it's going to impact investors, developers, just like anybody who's in the market, it's going to impact them regardless, some more than others. But the way that usually when it's always good to look at what the big companies are doing and what the big firms are doing, because it always affects them first. So when you're seeing like companies like Meta or like Twitter or Google, and they're starting to lay off all these employees, and then they're decreasing their footprints of their office leases. They're not renewing leases. They're putting up their properties for sublease. These are all things that we have to look at as being like general in the market to know that, okay, so if it's affecting them, they know that something is coming. So we just kind of have to follow down their methods. And they've been laying off people for months now. And we're not getting impacted until probably right now, or even within the next couple months from now. So it's always good to look at what's already been happening and then to know that it could get worse.
Especially when they have whole teams of people following the economics of the
Mhm.
market. And that's why they could make those kinds of cuts,
Mhm.
predictions, cuts and predictions. Yeah, well, it's good advice. Great. So the investors that you work with, they also may be familiar with alternative forms of payment, crypto. And of course, it's no secret that the crypto market has sort of followed the recession a bit and is down. Do investors talk about crypto or the security and immutability of blockchain transactions? Is that important to some of them?
Yes, I mean it comes up all the time because it's an entirely pool of it's a whole entire pool of buyers. And like I would be doing a disservice to my clients if I weren't open to accepting anything that's in the space of the blockchain, because it could always be converted into cash. It's very easy to do. There's a lot of companies that do it. And it comes up all the time because look, just in the state of Florida, within the last 2 years, over 120 businesses relocated to Florida. And a lot of them were in the tech space. So it's like, this is something that's changing, that's growing, and we have to be open and we have to be receptive to it, because if you're not ahead of the curve, like you will fail. And if somebody comes in and they say, hi, I want to buy this property with crypto, and let's say the property is $10 million, and then they say, no, we don't accept crypto, you're basically like, that's illegal to be a licensed agent and to not accept and to not be able to show the contract or not be able to do that. If you can provide the proof of funds, it's the same process like you're going into a bank and you're doing the due diligence and you're getting your pre-approval. There's ways to do that with crypto as well. So I'm very involved in that space because I like to be very forward thinking, and you can't eliminate any single buyer because you're just losing eyeballs at the end of the day on properties.
Yeah, and I think that investors really understand the whole idea of blockchain, which is kind of like the operating system, if you will, that
Mhm.
cryptocurrencies are transacted on. And with Propy, we've built our um, real estate transaction platform to operate on blockchain using smart contracts. But I do see that the financially savvy people, whether they are buyers themselves or they're investors, do see the future of alternative methods for payment, whether it's borrowing against crypto because they don't want to sell their crypto yet. They want to hodl,
Yeah,
have you
and that's
hodl.
becoming more popular nowadays
Yes,
too.
yes,
Lots of
because
you see a lot of lenders actually offering that service, which is exciting.
yes.
I'm very happy to see that people are changing and they're adapting.
Yeah, and you have to, as you say, serve your client's best interests, quote unquote, if you're a realtor, and it's their code of ethics. So I see how having alternative methods, whether it's converted back into fiat, really a cryptocurrency is the same as a currency, right? It
Mhm.
can be turned into a cash deal, so it's not that much different.
Mhm. Money is money at the end of the day. It's like you go to Mexico and you get pesos. It's like pesos and dollars. You go to the Middle East, you'll get a dirham, like the Canadian dollar. It's all the same thing. It's like
And you just
money is money.
and you go and pay an exchange fee and exchange at an exchange.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, gosh, you have some really interesting skills. What other asset classes or segments of commercial, since it spans so many different types of properties, are hot?
Mhm. So industrial, I would say, is probably second to multifamily. I mean, they're very different markets to begin with, and very different. I mean, you can't compare the two asset classes whatsoever. But industrial is a market that has always been hot, and it's something that's not going away. In the United States, the average industrial vacancy rate is between 1 to 4%. And just the cap rates alone are at almost 6% for industrial properties. And they make it very promising. And most investors who I work with, most of them want to buy industrial just because it's safe. For the most part, it's recession proof, not a recession proof in the way that there's always going to be a need for industrial properties. So we don't really see that going away. The thing is like it comes down to the land again and the density to be able to build more industrial properties. So, and like even now, I see that investors and developers are getting extremely creative. I mean, we just discussed Costco wanting to do apartments. It's the same thing with industrial properties. Look at Wynwood, how Wynwood is it was a bunch of abandoned warehouses when it was originally started. And now you have restaurants, you have clubs, you have like art galleries. They're converting the warehouses into retail. A warehouse should be less than $20 a foot. Like I remember when warehouses were like $6, $7, $8 a square foot a few years ago. And now you're going into those same markets and it's like $13 to $15 a square foot. But then you're going to other submarkets where they actually created an entire community around it. And they're making it so cultural, and you're seeing them charge over $100 a square foot. So just in that sense, and just being creative, you could really disrupt the market if you have a really good idea. And it's just a property is a property. It's really who is behind it and what's your vision to make it forward. And then who are you going to bring with you? Because once you have that one person established in a market, then everybody else is just going to follow. And there's a lot of developments in Miami that are going to be the next design district, the next Wynwood, the next Coconut Grove, but we don't hear about them because they're all done anonymously, and
Interesting.
they keep them anonymous. Everything has to be done off market because that's the only way that you'll be able to lock in a price that's competitive, but not a price that you'll be overpaying.
Interesting. So it really is a win-win when you get affordable housing out of it, right? When you've bought low at
Mhm.
$20 a square foot for a dilapidated warehouse and turn it into a whole community, which has retail
Mhm.
and multifamily and townhouses, for example.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
an amazing win-win.
It
Yeah,
screams income producing in
yeah.
every language.
Which is what cap rates is all about, right? It's the return on your capital. Is there a formula for that?
Yeah, so a
Yeah.
cap rate is like super easy to calculate. Everything is based on a cap rate. The national average cap rate for like multifamily in the United States is 4.5%. Office, retail, and industrial all ranges like within like the 5%, give or take, between like 5 and 5.8. So they're pretty strong for the most part. But a lot of times, because sellers are just very unrealistic in the market right now, they think that they can get the highest and over market value for their properties. So it's not so much, it's like finding sellers who will actually take market value is a little bit unrealistic. And that's what makes the cap rates go down, because nobody's going to buy a property if at less than a 4% cap rate.
Yeah, and that seems pretty easy to explain to the seller. But of course, that's also true in residential, that they are
Yeah.
remembering even just last week's appraisal
Mhm.
or comps. And I imagine it must be really difficult to get comps on some of these situations. So,
Yeah, like
yeah.
I pull comps sometimes and I try to do it, but the information is just so irrelevant because like the data that's out there and the estimated, sometimes it's so low that you can't even use it,
Mm, yeah.
especially in like the fully developed areas.
And, an experienced agent like you would know that versus,
Mhm.
using that and then setting the wrong expectations of the
Yeah,
seller.
exactly.
Yeah, that could
Because
be really dangerous.
it's not public information a lot of times. So it all just really comes down to your network. And if you know who did what deal, or like you just have a relationship with them, you just call them. It's like, hey, I saw you did this. What did you get for that? Or what was this? And then you kind of have to create your own market analysis and your own market reports.
Yep. Well,
Mhm.
I'm also interested in seeing what happens in that. This is probably another webinar session since we're almost at the bottom of the hour, but like the Salesforce tower, what did they just unload? I don't know, 10,000 employees, what have you, but they built this huge, or Mark Benioff, this huge tower with a transportation district, or, area for bringing in public transportation. And what are they going to do? That's just one company of the tech sector that's having layoffs. Could it become, I guess the zoning would have to change, but could that become affordable housing?
Mhm.
Do you have any ideas on that?
Yes. So that's actually very creative. I know that in like by Silicon Valley, San Francisco region, there's over 500 million square feet that's up for sublease right now, just because of people working from home or relocating. But in the actual companies that they had the entire building, a lot of these buildings, especially in areas like San Francisco, where there's a really large homeless population, they're becoming homeless shelters. And I feel like we're going to start seeing that right now in Miami-Dade, more in some areas where there is like a lot of homeless communities, but it just comes down to who's going to be the person who takes that initiative. So you can always make a way. We're in a very, if I were to define the commercial real estate market just for this year, it's going to be the year where it's creative deals. And I feel like we are creating the inventory and we're creating how you can convert properties. I mean, it's very easy to do. It's not easy to do a zoning change that requires a lot of work, and you need attorneys, and there's just a lot that goes into play there. But there is ways to go around it. Like if a restaurant wants to open up, but they can't get their licensing and they can't get the zoning for it, they're going to put up a food truck on the back of the property to be able to cook the food and then just seat people on the inside. So that's just like one example of being creative in the market. Warehouses into restaurants, like just big box retail industrial places into multifamily. I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that this year in the market. Is just different opportunities, and just knowing what's next and what could be converted, what is distressed that could be torn down or remodeled. And that's where I think we're really headed in
Wow.
this year.
Wow. So if there are any investors watching this, or any sellers who are interested, you are amazing. The ideas you have, the experience you have to see what these opportunities are, to help understand the opportunities and get the highest return, and also what's good for the community, right? It's about serving affordable housing or retail better, in addition to delivering a better ROI or higher cap rate to the seller.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love that. Well, what I heard is you left us with a real gem. What I heard you say is this is going to be the year of creativity, of what are the possibilities. So I think you would be a great person for people to go to when they have a listing, or they have a seller, and they want to do a referral, if they're in residential, or if we have some owners here, to reach out to you. So how can they find you? Do you have a
I'm
website?
everywhere. I'm everywhere. I'm just Carly Chinses across everything. Nobody else has my name in the world. I'm just one. So I'm on every single social media outlet. I have my own website, and I'm pretty easy to find.
Excellent. And you mentioned social media. Do you have a podcast, or do you do TikTok, or where else can they find you on social?
Everything,
Okay.
Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know, there's so many, but
Wow.
I'm on most of them.
I am following you. So everybody who's listening live or attending this webinar here, if you don't mind me saying, suggesting that they connect with you, and maybe they'll learn from something from you, and maybe they can do something in return for you. So.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, gosh, what an interesting, fascinating for me. I learned so much because I'm not that familiar with commercial real
Good.
estate. Interesting points of view, and your creative thinking is amazing. So, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much
And
for having me. I
yeah,
appreciate it and all the efforts that you guys do to putting these together.
yeah. Well, that's what we're about. Propy is about educating. As you know, we're breaking new ground, and sometimes we have to educate what is blockchain, and all of our transactions close on blockchain. It's a plus. Some people don't understand what that is, so we have to do this education, and inviting somebody like you who is in alignment with Web3 and forward-looking companies, working with companies like us that help support you with your own positioning that you are a tech savvy and Web3 oriented real estate
Mhm.
agent. So thank you again. We appreciate you
Thank you. Thank you
being
so
here.
much.
Yeah, and for everybody else, thanks for joining, and join us this time next week where we will have episode 145. Thank you again. Take care, everybody.